spark plug jig. This is just my take or my union of acrylics and a sparkle minnow, two of my favorite jig style patterns. Just another one that I like to use and experiment with. This is a good trout pattern. I also use this in a couple variety color variations for smallmouth bass and even some of the local pickerel. I've even begun using this in some of the larger sizes on different jig configurations for even muskie as well, especially in the late season. But the idea, obviously, with this approach is these patterns don't need to be complicated. You want the patterns to drop. These are not patterns that we're trying to swim, trying to get them to kick or turn. These are patterns that are kind of built like a perdigon or like a deep European nymph. That is, it's kind of a thin profile. It's going to drop quickly down to the bottom, and we can use the rod tip to either drift it or animate the tail and get the fly to kick out and turn just a little bit. But these flies don't need to be overly complicated, and also they need to be simple and quick to tie. This is a pattern that you're going to be fishing often close to stream bottom. So anytime you're going to be coming in contact with rocks, obstructions, snags, and so forth, you're going to be losing a few of these from time to time. So this is one reason why I'm using simple patterns and easy to tie jig patterns when I'm doing this approach. To get started, we're going to start off with a Wapsi Super Jig. This is a 1/8 ounce with a size 2 hook. This is a little large for some of my trout fishing. I will use this, but back home for trout, I'm going to be using maybe more like a size 4 or size 6 with a little lighter jig. This is more of a smallmouth bass size or pickerel size, at least for the waters I fish back home. For the tail, we're going to be using extra select craft fur, longer fibers in the white. Again, the idea with these patterns is you don't want these patterns, you do want some profile, but you don't want to build or use materials that are going to collect moisture. You want materials that are going to kind of wick moisture and allow you to kind of slice and dice your fly through that water column without feeling like you're pulling a wet sock. So we're going to just take a tuft of this here, and just like deer hair, when you clip the base, just any of those extra fluff or guard, those hairs that are left, just pull those out. For the tail, what I'm going to do here is I like the tail to be maybe 1 1/4 times the length of the hook shank. Usually when I'm fishing single hook point streamers, I want the hook point kind of dead center. So I'm going to just measure this off about 1 1/4, 1.5 times. If you're doing smallmouth, it's not as big of a deal because they have, the larger mouths. They're going to inhale this trout. I may want to shorten this up, but since this is more of a smallmouth bass, you can go 1 1/4 times, 1.5 times. We're gonna pinch. Once I have my measurement for my tail, I just need maybe a 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch to kind of tie this down. So I'm gonna have my mark here and then just cut this to the right length. We're gonna tie this in. Just a couple loose wraps, tension wraps, and then just pull down, a couple loose wraps, pull down. And I'm going to do 3 nooses basically, where I'm going to make 2 or 3 wraps, pull, slide, position my thread forward, pull down, and then do this one more time, 2, 3, and pull down. These are individual fibers. Unlike a marabou, where often you might be tying in with a single plume, if you don't lock these fibers in tight over time, each one of these little fibers may come loose. So I really want to make sure that this is nice and secure. Once I do that, then we're going to wrap back. Now, I want the hook point kind of dead center or close to dead center. And the reason I'm saying that is when people say fish is always going to hit the fly head first, that's not true. Predatory fish, bass, muskie, they will hit the fly from whatever angle they can in order to basically slow, stop, or kill, stunt the bait fish. When they eat it or when they reposition it, usually they'll reposition the fish in a manner where they're going to eat the fly or eat the minnow or bait fish head first. So what I mean by that is they're not always going to hit your streamer head first. They can come in from any angle. And usually when I'm fishing a single hook point, I like it dead center because whether the fish is coming in from the front from the side or from the back, I'm gonna have a decent shot of actually getting a good hook set. But if I have this hook point, assuming that the fish is always gonna hit the fly head first, my hook point far up with a really long tail, anytime that fish is coming in, usually from the side or from the back side, especially trout with smaller mouths, I'm not gonna get as good of a hook set. So I like my hook point dead center, or close to dead center on these occasions. For the body, we're gonna use a polar chenille, the larger white UV. Find a color scheme that works for you, but this little white and copper variation is a good one for me locally. I think it does a good job imitating like the black nose days. And we're just gonna tie the tip in right here. Lock that in nice and tight, a couple extra wraps. We're gonna move this now thread forward. With this polar chenille, as you know, we're gonna try to untwist this as much as possible, just like a hackle. We're gonna create some tension and we're gonna just stroke these fibers back, just like a hackle as best as we can. We're gonna start making wraps. And as soon as I start coming in contact with the hook and those fibers are kicking out, I'm just gonna take my hand, my non-bobbin hand, and just kind of stroke those fibers back and upward. It's gonna allow those hairs to kind of those fibers to stand straight up. Get this nice hackled effect. And every time you're wrapping, obviously the cord's gonna be twisting if you maintain a grip on it. So every time I'm making 1 or 2 wraps, I just kind of relax my grip, re-grip it, and just hopefully I'll get those fibers going straight up and down, just like this. The materials I use within the last couple of years, my material selection has dropped maybe by a third, even half. I just try to find a handful of materials to tie a small variety of flies. So for this polar chenille, it's great stuff. I use this for scalp snacks and other streamers, but also for this jig pattern. You don't have to use the polar chenille for this body. It could just be a flashier chenille or any other sorts, but I just like this again for this polar chenille for my jigs because it has a nice profile, but it just glides to the water. It doesn't feel like you're pulling a wet sock or create too much friction while you're jigging your streamer up and down the water column. I'm gonna go close up to the jig and we're just gonna tie this off. Once and twice here. Tie that down. Now, what we're gonna do here with this jig, the way you see the jig right now, this is gonna be, it looks like the top, but when you're fishing this, the hook is going to invert. So this is actually the bottom. So with most bait fish, you have kind of a darker top, lighter bottom. To give the fly a little bit more profile and just give it a little bit more maybe of a minnow profile look, I'm gonna take Senyo's Laser Dub in the silver minnow belly color. I'm gonna take a nice little pinch of this. I'm gonna pinch dead center here. Just pull off these fibers on either side. Get any of the loose ends out. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just use this because it has a nice little taper to create kind of a belly profile. So I'm gonna basically split this in half here with my finger, thumb and index finger. I'm gonna lay one side closer to you. We're gonna pinch. And I'm gonna make one tight loose wrap. I'm gonna snug that right in behind the jig. Now I'm gonna just fold this over towards me and make a couple loose wraps on top. Secure that, a few more wraps. Okay, now I have a nice little belly here. If you have a full rotary, you can switch, or in this case, I'm just gonna undo and then reattach. Now what we're gonna do now is we're going to give the fly the top layer. It's gonna have some gaudiness, it's gonna have a little bit of bling, and it's gonna give us the kind of that sparkle minnow look to it. We're gonna take Ripple Ice. Here I'm using the copper color. I'm gonna take these strands, just like before with all the other materials, just kind of go dead center right here and just pull out any of the loose ends on one side. And you'll see some of the stuff, this is why they call it ripple. It's almost kind of untamed right here. We're just gonna pinch this. And I'm gonna measure this off right here. I'm going to take this tip, I'm going to try to just go slightly beyond the bend of the hook. And before I do that, I'm just going to try to just create a little bit of a taper with my scissors right here. So I'm just going to tie this in. I'm going to go slightly just beyond the bend. And just like with the Senyo laser dub, I'm just going to lay this on the side closer to you. I'm going to make one pinch here, lock that in, a couple wraps. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this other side, fold it over towards me, and tie this down. Pinch. The side that I just pulled over towards me is a little bit longer, so I'm going to just use the first cut as a reference, as the benchmark as to how far I want to make my cut, and then I can just cut this. And I can even cut this at just kind of a little bit of a taper or an angle. Now, make a few more wraps with your thread, and we're almost done right here. Build up a bit of a thread head. You can use a super glue whip finish here, or we can just do a regular whip finish by just taking your tool once. I know they say if you do a whip finish correctly the first time, you don't need to do it a second time, but for me, I like to do it with streamers. A streamer will last you quite a long time. I just like having 2 and 3 backups. And then putting a little head cement on there, but right there is just a really simple little jig pattern. I think it does a really nice job imitating a lot of the forage fish, especially like the black-nosed dace. And if you want to get a little more creative with this and give the fly a little bit, maybe a third tone, you can take some black ripple ice, lay it on top, and that's why they call them like a black-nosed dace. So you can take a black permanent marker and mark it. But this is nice. And the one other point I want to make here is this. This is a 1/8 ounce jig. This is a really heavy jig. When I start fishing jigs of this size and this weight, basically, most of the European style nymphing rods, like the 3 weights that I normally use, have a softer tip. It's sometimes difficult, if not impossible, but it's not efficient casting those flies or these flies on those rods. Those rod tips are so soft. When you have that much weight, you often will see almost like what I call a death wobble. It's just so much mass under that rod tip where the rod tip doesn't track and give you as much accuracy. So when I'm going with jig flies like this, I'm often using like a 5, 6, or 7 weight rod, something with a tip that's a little stouter, like stiffer, a little more powerful, and it's going to be able to allow me to make a more accurate cast. And anytime I'm using like jig streamers for trout, I'm going to go a little bit lighter, but that lighter weight and that smaller size fly, it's just going to make casting those flies with those softer tip rods that much easier. But hopefully here in the next week or two, I'll actually go in the water. I'm going to do a video, just kind of an updated version on some of the things I've been playing around with a jig approach with a European nymphing rig. And hopefully this information is helping you out. But there it is. There is the spark plug jig, another little jig streamer I use on a regular basis. This one's for bass, but you can downsize this for trout. So there you are. I hope you enjoy, and thank you for taking the time to watch. Take care.